Let's get talking now. Report has revealed that 36 states of Nigeria grew revenue by 29% to 6.6 billion naira in 2022 from 5.1 trillion naira in 2021. Well, this is according to Budget, a civic advocacy organization, in its 2023 edition States of States report released recently. The report explained that internally generated revenue of 36 states appreciated by 12.98% to 1.61 trillion naira in 2021 to 1.82 trillion naira in 2022, signifying a strengthened domestic revenue mobilization capability. Cumulatively, it says, states' reliance on transfers from federal government increased from 58.4% in 2021 to 61.45% in 2022. Let's break this down, and I have the right person in the house. Mr. Seun Onigbinde, Director, Co-founder, Budget. Thank you so much. It's good to have you in the studio.
It's a pleasure being
here. Yes, it's been a while. It's been most like Zoom online connection, but we have you here now.
Thank you so much. I feel excited.
Thank you. Yeah, same here. Let's start with this report. And one thing I pull out of it is that states still depend so much on the federal government.
Yeah.
Give us a breakdown of the figures and what we want Nigerians to know about this report before we get into more details.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think we're observing the trends. We're looking about how much dependence states have on federal allocation. Let's not forget, it's federation revenues. It doesn't belong to the federal government. We will also want to see what the states can still generate into. A chunk of federal revenues come from oil revenues and maybe corporate taxes, VAT. And we see that states are not looking inwards enough. You know, a lot more dependence is coming on the federal side. It also speaks about the weakness of the economy. If productivity is weak, growth is minimal, states will not be able to collect effectively from what is happening within their states. So it also reflects sometimes the institutional capacity of the states or even the general economic health of the country. But most importantly, our report looks at states in terms of their fiscal performance and ability to be sustainable, ability to withstand shocks. And we have 4 pillars. You know, we have broken down into A, A1, B, C, and D. And so technically 5 pillars if you put it together that way. And we're looking at, 1, how are you able to depend on your high IGR to fund your operational cost? And in that alone, we saw that Lagos and Kaduna are the only 2 states that have the capacity to use their IGR to fund their operational cost. We also looked into the fact that how much is left for you to fund your capital expenditure. So how much do you have left? If we take all the money from your operational cost, how much is left for your capex? Then we also look at debt. I mean, the states that have debt. One thing that we found also that states that have significant external debt, the likes of Cross River, Edo, Kaduna, Lagos, even in Ekiti to some extent, are going to face fiscal pressures going forward, considering the current phase of devaluation that is happening. So you have that also the devaluation risk is going to affect states. For the federal government as a way of mitigating this in some sort of way, but I think states that have borrowed significantly from the external markets are going to face some significant pressure. So. And that's why when you look at our ranking, Rivers comes first. People would think Lagos would be first, but you know,
I thought as much too.
Yeah, but for the last 3 years, Rivers has led the pack. Why? Because relatively, its depth is small. And also when you look at and also we have to be honest that its domestic numbers, depth numbers have not been current as they should be. But based on the data we have, the depth is relatively still small. And also it has some robust IGR in the country. I mean, apart from Lagos, I mean, Ogun, Rivers, and those are like the leaders of the pack when it comes to high IGR. So for me, so when you look at the size of the civil service and operational cost, it's 30 billion higher than Bayelsa. I mean, Bayelsa is a place of 8 local governments, and that also speaks how a oil-producing state like that, with significant revenues from the federal government, would come very low on our ranking. Bayelsa is, I think 35 out of 36. We have maybe better of Zamfara. And then we have Yobe, Plateau, we have them, that same corridor also. So in a way, there is a need for us, the states should look at their operational cost and rationalize that effectively. and also be able to, and if you cannot rationalize your operational costs like Lagos, as we've seen in Lagos, you have to be able to churn out revenue significantly.
True. To be able to meet up with what your focus or your targets for the people. And now the report also is focusing on subnational healthcare delivery and improved economic development. Is that a theme or behind it? Why subnational healthcare delivery and well, of course, that will translate to improve economic development.
Yeah, two things. One is that we had at our event at the launch on Tuesday.
Yeah, in Abuja, right?
Abuja, yes. We had the NGF, which is the chairman of the NGF, of the Nigerian Governors Forum, which is Governor Abdul Razak. We had him. He stayed from the beginning to the end.
Wow.
And it was very instructive. And we also had all the senior leaders of the NGF. It was very instructive because we always take health like a social sector item to say health. And it was also clear that there are political dimensions to these things. When you invest in education and health, considering the long-term effect or the long-term result around health, you might struggle to see what exactly you're trying to do. And people might not appreciate you. They might even say you have failed compared to someone who's building roads and bridges around town. So it was very clear that also citizens have a lot of work to do in showing to political leaders that healthcare is top on our agenda. Investing in healthcare is also very critical to us. And we also want to switch the narrative for healthcare, which is that healthcare is not just a social sector expenditure, it's an investment. If you invest in people, if you invest in healthcare, if you pay attention to their health situation, you would find out that the economic opportunities and the productivity in their countries would increase. So one of the things we've looked here is that if we're talking about health, we should see it from an investment perspective. And health means we have to look at indicators, from UNICEF, the MICS, the multiple indicators survey. We looked into that and we were able to dimension that which states are high on the ranking, which states are low on the ranking. And I think a lot of people have taken this in good faith, that you might do well on fiscal performance, which means you're sustainable as a state, but you also expect that you will put more result and more investment in the quality of life within your state. Yeah.
Very, very interesting stuff, and this is reality. When we look at the IGR, that's the figure that gave us the 6.6 trillion. A whole year for all the states. I don't think this is good enough.
It's not good enough. And if you dimension that, it's almost 60.
Percentage, Lagos will be doing like...
Yeah, it's almost 60s that are carrying around 65% of that.
Obviously,
because you have Lagos, Ogun, Delta, Rivers. If you put maybe Kano or and Kaduna, everybody else is doing less than $40 billion naira per year. It's something worrisome. And by the time you now benchmark it against the recent devaluation of the currency,
makes it worse.
It's that entire IGR is worse than a decent county in the United States. I mean, counties like equivalent of our local government here. We have a problem with productivity as a country, and it's better we also have a problem with state capacity, and we also have a problem with collecting the effective data to be able to get the required IGR. And I think more of the interest should be on productivity. Most of the states that we have seen the government is still the largest employer of labor. In fact, sometimes the federal establishment in those states are the highest employer of labor. So it's more like as if the federal government is just paying payee to the states. The private sector has to be invested in, has to be supported, has to be facilitated to succeed. Because you can't tax nothing. If nothing exists, you can't put nothing on nothing. It's about, if you want to get something, you must ensure that you can energize productivity in your state. And I'm liking that people are also looking at green economy, looking at different angles to be able to say, where does IGR actually come from? Also, you have to also look at statistics, because we have to be honest with ourselves. Nigeria is still grossly an informal economy. So how do you able to capture, or are you able to incentivize people?
That's like tax reform here now. That's what you're talking about now. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because fiscal and tax reform has to be on the table. If you are a grossly informal economy, there are two things that have to happen. We either have to capture the informal economy properly, or we incentivize them to formalize. Because when they formalize, they have documentation, we're able to look at income levels, and we're able to now understand the size of taxes they are meant to pay. So tax and fiscal reforms is also something on the way, not just at the state level. And I'm happy that the Taiwo Idele-led committee is not looking at the federal government tax reform situation alone. The Joint Tax Board is on board because the state level, the federation taxing is what needs a lot of reform, not just the federal government tax alone. And the third thing is, being able to now have the state capacity to do so effectively, because, the law, Lagos State has had fortune of investing a little bit in its IRS. They've been effective to some extent. That excellence or that capabilities do not extend to all the states within the country. And so that's something that state governments have to also look effectively at. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Deficit in infrastructure, primary health care, education, and the ease of doing business. These are some of the, I think, that you looked at in this report. Now, I want to stay with ease of doing business. Do you think the states are doing enough to support the federal government? The federal government has been doing a lot too around ease of doing business, but there needs to be that handshake between the federal government, subnationals, to be able to impact on the of the proceeds being made by the states. Do you see that handshake?
We have to be realistic and we have to do it right, because a lot of times we benchmark ourselves around the World Bank indicators, which is more for signaling, And let's be honest with ourselves, the World Bank index, which I think they've stopped, only looks at Lagos and Kano and the federal government. It's not looking at the entire states. There are some other supplementary report that now looks at state level, but the one that gets us the ranking that we look at globally is only focused on the states, the two states and the federal government. So there has to be some deliberate interest to facilitate. And one of the key ways people do this is to create a one-stop shop to access all government services. Because if you look at ease of doing business, is that the handshake between the private sector and the public sector, it's always complicated. It's always challenging for a lot of people. I want to get a tax, I want to take the tax permit, or I want to get some documentation about taxes. I'm struggling to do that. Register a business. You want to formalize maybe a land transaction. You want to do a land search, anything that has to do with government services, you find that it could be extremely bureaucratic and challenging. So one of the things you found people create a one-stop shop. That all the agencies are plugged in from the back end and people are able to track, how quick do you deliver this service to this person. We have to, make it so easy for people to formalize businesses and for them to be able also to file taxes and repatriate earnings. And those are the kind of things that we must do. Without facilitating the environment for the private sector to thrive, we're not going anywhere. When you look at the multiple challenges we're facing now, exchange rates is going off the roof. We have fuel subsidy, we have lack of productivity. It's just because the depth of our private sector, is weak. We look at the size of our stock exchange, compare that with South Africa. Look at the size of our taxes, compare that with, economies that's not as huge as us. We need to understand that a country thrives on the depth and the strength of its private sector. And that's what the entire work of public institutions should be about. How do you use the opportunities for the private sector to thrive? And how do you provide welfare for those who cannot be captured in that bracket?
Budget is doing a lot of work. And, when you see things like this that have to do with states, and I know, how are the governors taking it? Yes, you said the chairman of the government was there. So, yes, I'm going to ask you that question. How are they taking it? And what are you expecting moving forward from them, really?
A lot of them take it well. Some have taken it for improvement. For example, Seun was really around 33, a few years ago. They moved up the way to up to 11. Means that technically they are out of the woods in some sort of way. They had this significant borrowing and they fed a lot of challenges over the years. But I think you could say that they're out of the woods to some extent. Rivers, definitely, if you're leading the pack, you'll be excited. Kwara's also a decent showing. Lagos. Some states do not find it easy. Maybe ask questions about our methodology, and we're happy to engage them further. I don't think Bayelsa has been excited by its position. But we have said that you can't be small as a state like Bayelsa and run a huge operational cost in that way. You need to also look at the size of your operational cost relative to your size. And you also have to look at if you're investing a lot, that way, is it generating income level like high IGR for the state? Bayelsa has one of the lowest IGRs in the country. But it gets a lot of revenue from the federal. Let's not assume that oil prices dip by 50%. So what would you be doing?
Oil derivation, all of these revenues, all of these. That's true. They get a lot of money.
Yeah, so if it dips by 50%. So the importance of those money, these funds are seeds. They are not your harvest. They are seeds. The monies that you are supposed to invest into further expand the economy and generate much more opportunities, not spending on operational costs like civil servants and administrative costs of the government. Yeah.
It's an interesting one. Well, we'll keep it up. What more should we be expecting from budget moving on before the end of this year? Maybe one more report. I'm expecting
the first budget of the Bola Tinubu administration.
Oh, that's true. They're looking at 26 trillion.
Yeah, that's a significant rise. And debt servicing will be around 8 trillion. So which means
8 trillion debt servicing.
Yeah, so which means we're in the woods. We'll be keeping tabs on that specifically, and also looking at energy transition and health also going forward. Yeah.
Great work, eh? Well done. Thank you so much. Let me have that handshake with you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. I have Seun here live in the studio. He's the director, co-founder of BudgIT Nigeria. Thank you so much, and do have a great weekend.
That we should best too. Thank you.
All right.